of the test organism must contain all factors that is necessary to support the growth of the test organism. The test organism must be supplied with all the nutrients that it needs for normal growth and metabolism. Both the culture medium, so we know, okay, this is the pH of our culture medium, and this is the pH of our test or assay material. So when we know it, it will be easier for us to now buffer it so that it will not be too high, too low for it. Now, we also need to consider the oxygen relationship. Oxygen relationship. This factor is of relatively minor importance. Several reports in the literature indicate that oxidation reduction potential of culture media might contribute to vitamin assay variation. The addition of cysteine, thioglycolate, or ascorbic acid will help minimize this. But in most assay procedure, this precaution is unnecessary. So certain organisms such as acetobacter suppositones used for the assay of pentathenol and yeast in general require a supply of oxygen for every growth. This is accomplished either by continuous shaking during incubation or by the use of flax, which will give a favorable ratio of surface to volume. So the oxygen relationship is also, though minor, but it's also key because some microorganisms will not be able to do well under oxygen level. Some can oxidize, some can reduce. So that's why sometimes it is a minor aspect, but it should be given a thought when we are also preparing our culture media. So these are things we need to consider in preparing our culture media. So far, we've been looking at analytical microbiology. We've been looking at the various ways by which microorganisms can be used in the lab to assay certain chemicals. We are using them as reagents to test for the efficacy of some chemicals before it is finally put to use. And we have looked at different ways which we can do this. We mentioned from the onset that for us to do that, we need to first look at the test organism. The test organism is very key. It's very key. We have to identify the microorganisms of choice that can help us when it comes to such chemicals. There are various chemicals we can assay with different microorganisms. They vary. So depending, and these can be determined by the operator. The operator will determine what type of microorganisms he needs to work. And there are factors, several factors that he or she will have to consider. You have to look at those several factors to be able to determine what microorganisms will work for. This has to do with the results it needs. What result is he looking for? Is it a positive or a negative response? Is he looking for? Is it the metabolism? And he's trying to see, the result of the metabolism. These are things you will need to consider. There are several things. Also, you also look at the culture media. The culture media, the environments, the suitability of the medium that is using. These are things you will need to consider. You look at them critically before it will start. We will start to assay the microorganisms. So the test organisms, like we said, must be sensitive to the substance being assayed. If they are not sensitive to it, then it will not work For example, you have an inhibitory substance and the organisms you are using is not sensitive to that substance, then you have invalid results. So, and the test organisms we also told you must be easily cultivated in the lab. If they are too difficult to cultivate, then it will be difficult for you to. That's why you see there are some organisms that we cannot really understand how. Like most organisms that usually live within the the volcanic strata, because of the hotness of that, this kind of make it, we cannot kind of reciprocate that in the lab. So it makes us difficult for us. So whatever we are using, it must be organisms that are easily cultivated. It must also have some metabolic functions that are measurable. We should be able to measure these metabolic substances that they are going to produce at the end of it. Should be able to measure them. It must not be susceptible to variation. It must not be susceptible to variation. We've mentioned all this. When we are looking at the types of microbial response, we say look at microbial, we look at the growth response. Is it positive or negative? We look at the metabolic response. What are they producing? What are they not producing? Then we also look at the types of microorganisms that can be used. So we can use different types of microorganisms ranging from bacteria, yeast, fungi, protozoas. These are materials that can be used. And when we also look at, we also talk about factors that are involved in growing our microorganisms. That's for us to grow our microorganisms, we need to look at factors which must be dependent on the nature of the organisms. We also look at the factors that must be dependent on the environment. We also look at the influence of temperature, how it affects the organisms. How it affects the organisms. And when you are trying to use cultures for your growth, you consider the age of the culture, the size of the culture, the relationship of temperature to the culture media, the oxygen relationship. We've mentioned all this. We've looked at the age. That's normally, it should be at the log phase. Log phase. Then we'll look at the size of the inoculum. Must not be too much in order to get, and it must be a pure culture. Must be a pure culture. The temperature relationship, it must not be the optimum temperature because we might not use optimum temperature. But we'll look at the best temperature. So the best temperature we can use to grow our microorganisms. Can use to grow the micro. The culture media, because we did mention the culture media. The culture media must be highly selective. Highly selective. And what are those things I would say must be contained in the culture? We just discussed that now. The culture media must, the culture media, like I did mention, is that it must contain all factors that are necessary for the growth of the organisms. And what are these factors? The energy, the source of energy, the source of nitrogen, the mineral salts, and the growth factors. That must be considered. We also talk about it must not contain any constituents that will affect the substance, be acid or the test organism, be it a stimulant, be it a substance, be it an inhibitory factor. These must be considered. Then we also talk about the pH. pH is also very important. The acidic and basic acidity of it, and the oxygen relationship, which is also very key for us to consider. So all these are things we need to consider when it comes to analytical microbiology, in analyzing different chemical sample using different microorganisms. So this is where we'll be calling it a wrap. I believe you have learned one or two things from my class. So if you have questions, send it to my email. I will respond to them. Wishing you well as you prepare for your exam. Bye-bye.